The hotel manager, who reluctantly assigned the elderly black woman to share a cramped room with 3 strangers because that's all we have available for someone in your price range, had no idea he was speaking to Victoria Sterling, the hospitality executive who owned the 4-star Grand Heritage Hotel and was conducting an unannounced inspection to evaluate how her staff treated guests who appeared to have limited financial resources. 67-year-old Victoria stood at the front desk of her own hotel, wearing a modest travel outfit and carrying a small worn suitcase, looking exactly like the budget-conscious traveler she was pretending to be, while observing whether her establishment lived up to the values of dignity and respect that she had built her hospitality empire upon. The manager, Derek Peterson, had been hired 6 months earlier with impressive credentials from other luxury hotels, but Victoria had been receiving concerning reports about declining service standards and complaints from guests who felt they were being treated differently based on their appearance or perceived economic status. "Ma'am, I understand you're disappointed about the room situation," Derek said with barely concealed impatience. "But our hotel caters to a certain clientele, and shared accommodations are really the most appropriate option for travelers who book our budget rate packages. The other guests in the room are very quiet and respectable." The condescending tone and obvious assumptions about Victoria's circumstances were exactly the kind of behavior that had prompted her to conduct this undercover evaluation. Victoria had built Grand Heritage Hotels on the principle that every guest deserved exceptional service regardless of their background, budget, or appearance, and Derek's attitude suggested that these values were not being consistently implemented. "I see," Victoria replied quietly. "And what makes you think that shared accommodations are more appropriate for me than a private room?" Derek glanced at Victoria's simple clothing and modest luggage before responding. "Well, given your booking through the budget travel website and your request for our lowest rate accommodation, it's clear that you're looking for the most economical option. Shared rooms allow us to provide safe, clean lodging at prices that are accessible to travelers who might not be able to afford our standard room rates." The explanation revealed Derek's assumption that Victoria's booking method and rate request indicated financial limitations, rather than recognizing that many experienced travelers, regardless of their economic status, preferred to research value options and make reservations through various channels. Victoria had intentionally booked the room using the budget travel website to understand the complete guest experience from initial reservation through checkout. She wanted to see whether guests who appeared to have modest means received the same courteous treatment and quality service that Grand Heritage Hotels promised to provide for every visitor. Victoria Sterling had begun her career in hospitality 42 years earlier as a housekeeper at a small hotel in Atlanta, working her way through college while learning every aspect of hotel operations, from guest services to facility management. Her grandmother, Marie Sterling, had taught her that true hospitality meant making every person feel welcomed and valued, regardless of their circumstances or the amount of money they spent. "Victoria," her grandmother had said during one of their conversations about work and treating people with respect, "when someone trusts you with their comfort and safety while they're away from home, that's a sacred responsibility. You honor that trust by treating them like family, not like customers whose only value is what they can afford to pay." Victoria had carried that philosophy throughout her career as she advanced from housekeeper to front desk clerk, from assistant manager to general manager, and eventually to hotel owner and hospitality executive. She had built Grand Heritage Hotels into a respected chain of 15 properties across the Southeast, known for combining elegant accommodations with genuine warmth and personalized service. But success had also created distance between Victoria and the day-to-day operations that determined whether her hotels actually delivered the guest experience she had envisioned. Regular management reports and customer satisfaction surveys provided useful data, but they didn't capture the subtle ways that staff attitudes and unconscious biases could undermine the hospitality values that were supposed to define the Grand Heritage brand. The undercover inspections that Victoria conducted quarterly at different properties had revealed troubling patterns. Guests who appeared wealthy or sophisticated received immediate attention and upgrades, while those who seemed to have modest means were often treated with less enthusiasm and offered fewer amenities, even when they were paying the same rates for comparable accommodations. Victoria's current inspection of the Grand Heritage Hotel in Charleston was prompted by specific complaints from guests who felt they had been treated dismissively by staff who made assumptions about their backgrounds based on their age, race, or apparent economic status. One elderly gentleman had written that front desk staff had questioned his ability to pay for premium room service, while a young family had been told that certain hotel amenities were probably not what they were looking for, based on their casual clothing and budget-conscious inquiries. Mrs. Derek paused, waiting for Victoria to provide her name for the room assignment. Johnson, Victoria replied, using the pseudonym she employed for her undercover inspections. Victoria Johnson. Derek typed the information into the computer system, assigning Victoria to room 347, a small space with 2 double beds that was typically used to accommodate travelers who prioritized affordability over privacy or luxury amenities. Ms. Johnson, you'll be sharing with Mrs. Patterson, who's here for her grandson's college graduation, and Mr. and Mrs. Chen, who are attending a family reunion. They're all very quiet guests who keep to themselves, so you shouldn't have any problems with noise or disruption. The casual way Derek discussed Victoria's roommates suggested that he regularly assigned guests to shared accommodations based on his assessment of their economic circumstances rather than their actual preferences or needs. Victoria wondered whether the other guests had specifically requested shared rooms or whether they had also been assumed to need budget-friendly housing arrangements. Are private rooms available at higher rates? Victoria asked, testing whether Derek would offer her alternatives or assume that cost was her primary concern. We do have some single occupancy rooms available, but they're significantly more expensive, Derek replied, his tone suggesting that such options were beyond Victoria's budget. The shared room is really the best value for travelers who are looking to minimize their accommodation expenses. Victoria noticed that Derek had not actually quoted rates for private rooms or asked about her budget preferences, instead making assumptions about what she could afford based on her appearance and initial booking method. A professional approach would have presented all available options with clear pricing information, allowing the guest to make informed decisions about their accommodation needs. I think I'll try the shared room first and see how it works out, Victoria said, accepting the key card that Derek offered with obvious relief that she had not requested more expensive accommodations that might require him to verify her ability to pay. As Victoria made her way to the elevator, she reflected on how different this check-in experience had been from the warm, personalized service that Grand Heritage Hotels was supposed to provide. Derek had treated her as a budget traveler who needed to be managed rather than as a valued guest who deserved respect and options. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor gave Victoria time to consider what she was learning about the gap between her company's stated values and the actual guest experience being delivered by staff who had internalized assumptions about appropriate treatment based on guests' perceived economic status. Room 347 was clean and adequately furnished, but it lacked the attention to detail and welcoming touches that distinguished Grand Heritage properties from standard budget accommodations. Victoria had specifically invested in amenities and design elements that would make every room feel special, regardless of its size or rate category. Victoria's 3 roommates were indeed quiet and courteous people who had been assigned to shared accommodations based on their appearance and booking methods rather than their actual preferences or financial capabilities. Mrs. Patterson was a retired teacher who had requested economical lodging while attending her grandson's graduation ceremony, while Mr. and Mrs. Chen were successful small business owners who had simply wanted to minimize travel expenses during an extended family visit. The situation revealed a troubling pattern of staff making assumptions about guests' needs and preferences rather than providing professional service that respected individual choices and circumstances. Victoria realized that her upcoming conversations with Derek and the hotel staff would need to address not just specific service failures, but fundamental attitudes about hospitality, respect, and the proper way to treat every person who trusted Grand Heritage Hotels with their comfort and safety. As Victoria settled into room 347, she was greeted warmly by her 3 roommates, who had already developed a comfortable camaraderie based on their shared experience of being assigned to budget accommodations, despite having different reasons for their economical travel choices. "Welcome, dear," said Mrs. Evelyn Patterson, a 74-year-old retired English teacher from Savannah who was attending her grandson's graduation from the College of Charleston. "I hope you don't mind that we've been chatting about our travels. It's nice to meet people who appreciate the value of practical accommodations over fancy amenities." Victoria smiled at the irony of Mrs. Patterson's comment, knowing that the room they were sharing was actually quite luxurious compared to the basic accommodations that many budget travelers encountered. The Grand Heritage Hotel's shared rooms included quality linens, complimentary toiletries, and thoughtful touches that reflected Victoria's commitment to maintaining high standards throughout her properties. "I'm David Chen," said the gentleman by the window, a 59-year-old owner of 3 successful restaurants in Birmingham who was traveling with his wife Linda to attend a large family reunion. "Linda and I have been coming to Charleston for family events for 15 years, and we've always found that staying at places like this gives us more money to spend on the experiences that really matter." Linda Chen, a gracious woman who had taught elementary school for 32 years before helping her husband expand their restaurant business, added, "We could afford more expensive hotels, but we've learned that comfortable, clean accommodations and friendly service matter more than marble bathrooms and designer furniture. Besides, the money we save on lodging allows us to take our grandchildren to nice restaurants and buy meaningful gifts for family members." The conversations revealed that Victoria's roommates were thoughtful, experienced travelers who had made deliberate choices about their accommodation preferences rather than being forced into shared rooms by financial limitations. Their situations highlighted the problem with Derek's assumptions about appropriate lodging based on guests' appearance or booking methods. Victoria reflected on how her grandmother Marie Sterling would have responded to guests like Mrs. Patterson and the Chens. Marie had taught Victoria that true hospitality meant understanding each guest's individual needs and preferences, rather than making judgments based on superficial characteristics or preconceived notions about what different types of people could afford or would appreciate. Marie Sterling had worked as a cook and housekeeper for wealthy families in Atlanta during the 1940s and 50s, an experience that had taught her about both excellent service and the importance of treating every person with dignity, regardless of their economic status. Marie had witnessed how money could bring out both the best and worst in people, and she had developed strong opinions about the relationship between wealth, character, and the responsibility that came with serving others. "Victoria," Marie had told her granddaughter when Victoria was 16 and working her first job at a local diner, "I've seen rich people who were kinder than saints and poor people who were meaner than snakes. Money doesn't make someone worthy of respect, and lack of money doesn't make someone undeserving of good treatment. When you're serving people, you serve their humanity, not their bank account." Victoria had built her hospitality career on Marie's philosophy, understanding that excellent service meant paying attention to individual needs rather than making assumptions based on appearance, accent, or apparent economic circumstances. The success of Grand Heritage Hotels had been built on reputation for treating every guest as someone deserving of attention, courtesy, and genuine care. If this story is touching your heart, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. Victoria's career transformation from housekeeper to hotel owner had taken 28 years of careful planning, continued education, and strategic financial management. She had worked full-time while completing her hospitality management degree, had saved aggressively while learning every aspect of hotel operations, and had eventually secured financing to purchase her first small property in suburban Atlanta. That first hotel had been a modest 40-room establishment that previous owners had allowed to deteriorate through poor management and indifferent service. Victoria had renovated the property herself, working 16-hour days to restore guest rooms, upgrade common areas, and train staff in the customer service standards that would eventually become the foundation of the Grand Heritage brand. The success of Victoria's first hotel had enabled her to purchase additional properties, each one carefully selected for its potential to serve travelers who valued quality service and genuine hospitality over flashy amenities or prestigious locations. Victoria had focused on creating hotels that felt welcoming to families, business travelers, and seniors who appreciated attention to detail and personal service. During the renovation of her third property, Victoria had discovered a handwritten note that a previous guest had left in a drawer, expressing gratitude for the kindness and respect shown by hotel staff during a difficult family situation. The note had reinforced Victoria's commitment to training employees who understood that their job was to provide comfort and support for people who were often dealing with stress, uncertainty, or personal challenges during their travels. "Mrs. Johnson," Mrs. Patterson said, interrupting Victoria's memories, "I hope you don't mind my asking, but do you travel often? You seem very comfortable with shared accommodations, and I've met so many interesting people over the years who have wonderful stories about their adventures." Victoria appreciated Mrs. Patterson's curiosity while recognizing the irony of being asked about her travel experiences while staying in her own hotel. "I do travel frequently for work," Victoria replied truthfully. "I've learned that you can discover a great deal about places and people when you stay in accommodations that attract thoughtful, practical travelers." The conversation was interrupted by a loud knock on the door, followed by Derek Peterson's voice announcing that he needed to discuss room payment verification with the occupants. Victoria recognized this as an unusual and potentially problematic request, since room payments were typically processed during check-in rather than through subsequent visits to guest rooms. "Ladies and gentlemen," Derek said as Mrs. Patterson opened the door, "I need to verify credit card information for all guests in this room. We've had some issues with declined payments for budget rate accommodations, and hotel policy requires additional verification for shared room assignments." The request was both unprofessional and discriminatory, suggesting that Derek routinely questioned the financial credibility of guests who were assigned to shared accommodations while presumably not making similar demands of guests in private rooms or premium suites. Mr. Chen responded with obvious irritation. "Young man, our payment was processed when we checked in yesterday, and we have confirmation numbers for all charges. Why are you questioning our financial arrangements now?" Derek's tone became defensive as he realized that his request was being challenged by guests who understood their rights and were not intimidated by his implied authority. "Sir, this is just standard procedure for certain types of reservations. I'm sure you understand that the hotel needs to protect itself from payment issues." Victoria watched the interaction with growing concern about Derek's approach to guest relations and his apparent belief that certain categories of guests required additional scrutiny or verification procedures that were not applied uniformly to all hotel visitors. The situation was revealing serious problems with staff training, policy implementation, and the fundamental respect for guests that Victoria had established as the cornerstone of Grand Heritage Hotel operations. Derek's behavior suggested that he had either received inadequate training about appropriate guest treatment or had developed discriminatory practices that contradicted the company's stated values. Mrs. Patterson, drawing on decades of experience managing difficult situations as an educator, addressed Derek with the authoritative tone that had served her well in countless classroom and administrative challenges. "Mr. Peterson, I think there may be some confusion about hotel policies and appropriate guest treatment. Perhaps you should consult with your supervisor about the proper procedures for addressing payment concerns." The suggestion that Derek should seek supervisory guidance highlighted the problematic nature of his request and his apparent lack of understanding about professional hospitality standards. Victoria realized that her undercover inspection was revealing systemic issues that would require comprehensive staff retraining and possibly personnel changes to restore the service quality that Grand Heritage Hotels was supposed to provide. Derek's face flushed with anger as he realized that his authority was being questioned by guests he had assumed would be intimidated by his demands for additional payment verification. "Ma'am, I don't think you understand how hotels operate. These procedures are for the protection of all our guests, and I don't appreciate having my professional judgment questioned by people who are staying in shared accommodations." Mrs. Patterson's expression hardened with the steely determination that had served her through 4 decades of dealing with difficult administrators, uncooperative parents, and occasionally challenging students. "Young man, I have stayed in hotels across 3 continents, and I have never encountered a manager who questioned guests' payment credibility after rooms were already occupied and charges processed. Your behavior is both unprofessional and inappropriate." Victoria watched the confrontation escalate while feeling a profound sadness about how far her hotel's service standards had deteriorated under Derek's management. The scene unfolding in room 347 represented everything that was wrong with assumptions about guest treatment based on appearance, age, or perceived economic status. Mr. Chen stood up from his chair by the window, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to managing business operations and employee relations. "Mr. Peterson, I own 3 restaurants in Birmingham, and if any of my managers treated customers the way you're treating us, they would be looking for new employment immediately. Your approach to guest relations is unacceptable by any professional standard." Derek's defensive posture became more pronounced as he realized that his assumptions about the financial status and business experience of room 347's occupants had been completely wrong. The people he had categorized as budget travelers requiring additional scrutiny were actually successful professionals who understood customer service and recognized discriminatory treatment when they encountered it. "Sir, you don't understand the challenges of managing a hotel like Grand Heritage," Derek replied, his voice taking on a condescending tone that revealed his belief that restaurant ownership was somehow less sophisticated than hotel management. "We have standards to maintain and policies to enforce that protect the reputation of our establishment." Victoria could no longer remain silent as Derek continued to embarrass her hotel and contradict every principle that Grand Heritage properties were supposed to represent. The moment had come to reveal her identity and address the systematic failures that Derek's behavior had exposed. "Mr. Peterson," Victoria said, standing up from her bed and speaking with the calm authority that had served her through decades of hospitality leadership, "I think there's something you should know about the standards and reputation of Grand Heritage hotels." Derek turned his attention to Victoria with obvious irritation, apparently viewing her as another budget traveler who was overstepping appropriate boundaries by involving herself in his conversation with the other guests. "Ma'am, this discussion doesn't concern you," Derek said dismissively. "I'm addressing payment verification issues with the other occupants of this room, and I don't need additional complications from someone who isn't directly involved in the situation." Victoria reached into her modest travel purse and withdrew her business card, which identified her as Victoria Sterling, Chief Executive Officer of Grand Heritage Hospitality Group. She handed the card to Derek with the same professional courtesy that she expected all her employees to show every guest, regardless of their circumstances or the nature of their business interaction. Derek stared at the business card for several seconds, his expression shifting from irritation to confusion to dawning horror, as he realized that the woman he had assigned to shared accommodations and had just dismissed as irrelevant to hotel policy discussions was actually the owner of the entire Grand Heritage chain. "Mrs. Sterling," Derek whispered, his voice barely audible as the full magnitude of his mistakes began to register. I had no idea. The reservation was under the name Johnson." "Yes," Victoria confirmed calmly. "I conduct quarterly inspections of all Grand Heritage properties to ensure that our service standards are being maintained and that every guest receives the respectful treatment that our brand promises to deliver." Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Chen, and Mrs. Chen watched the revelation with fascination, understanding that they had just witnessed something extraordinary. A business owner who cared enough about customer experience to personally evaluate how her employees treated different categories of guests. "Mrs. Sterling," Mrs. Patterson said with obvious admiration, "you've created something remarkable here. Even staying in shared accommodations, we've been impressed by the quality of the furnishings, the cleanliness of the facilities, and the thoughtfulness of the amenities. It's clear that you care about providing excellent service regardless of what guests pay for their rooms. Victoria appreciated Mrs. Patterson's recognition of the positive aspects of her hotel, but she also understood that Derek's behavior had seriously undermined the guest experience and contradicted the hospitality values that Grand Heritage Hotels was supposed to embody. "Mr. Peterson," Victoria said, turning her attention back to the manager who was now standing frozen in obvious panic about the consequences of his discriminatory treatment of hotel guests. "I think we need to have a private conversation about Grand Heritage service standards and appropriate guest relations procedures." Derek nodded mutely, understanding that his employment was in serious jeopardy and that his assumptions about guest treatment had been exposed in the worst possible way. In front of the company's owner and the very guests he had been treating with disrespect and suspicion. "Mrs. Sterling," Mr. Chen said, "I want you to know that despite Mr. Peterson's inappropriate behavior, our overall experience at Grand Heritage has been positive. The hotel facilities are excellent, and most of your staff have been courteous and helpful. It's clear that you've built something special here, even if some employees haven't fully embraced the values you've established." Victoria felt grateful for Mr. Chen's balanced perspective, which recognized both the problems that needed to be addressed and the positive elements that made Grand Heritage Hotels worth preserving and improving. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria said, addressing her 3 roommates with genuine warmth, "I want to apologize for the service failures you've experienced and assure you that Mr. Peterson's behavior does not represent the hospitality standards that Grand Heritage is committed to providing." Linda Chen smiled with understanding that came from years of managing customer service challenges in her family's restaurant business. "Mrs. Sterling, we appreciate your personal attention to these issues. It's rare to encounter business owners who care enough about customer experience to evaluate their operations firsthand." Derek remained silent during these exchanges, apparently paralyzed by the realization that every assumption he had made about room 347's occupants had been spectacularly wrong. The budget travelers he had treated with condescension and suspicion included successful business owners and experienced professionals, while the woman he had dismissed as financially limited was actually the CEO who controlled his employment future. Victoria understood that Derek's failures represented broader issues with staff training, hiring practices, and the implementation of company values throughout the Grand Heritage system. The conversation in room 347 had revealed that her quarterly inspections needed to be more frequent and more comprehensive to ensure that service standards were being maintained consistently across all properties. "Mr. Peterson," Victoria said, "please meet me in the hotel's conference room in 30 minutes. We need to discuss not only tonight's incident, but the broader patterns of guest treatment that have prompted complaints about service inconsistencies at this property." As Derek left room 347 with obvious reluctance and dread, Victoria reflected on the complex emotions she felt about discovering serious problems at one of her own hotels. The disappointment was balanced by satisfaction that her undercover inspection had revealed issues that could be addressed before they caused more damage to guest relationships and company reputation. 3 months following her undercover inspection at the Charleston Grand Heritage Hotel, Victoria Sterling stood in the elegantly renovated lobby, wearing the same modest travel outfit that had once caused Derek Peterson to question her worthiness for quality accommodations, now welcoming a group of hospitality students who had come to study the industry-leading customer service training program that had emerged from that transformative night in room 347. The changes had been comprehensive and profound in ways that extended far beyond personnel adjustments and policy revisions. Victoria had used the lessons learned during her shared room experience to revolutionize how Grand Heritage Hotels approached guest relations, staff training, and the fundamental philosophy of hospitality service. Derek Peterson was no longer employed by Grand Heritage Hotels. His departure had been inevitable once Victoria reviewed security footage that revealed a pattern of discriminatory behavior toward guests who appeared to have modest means or who made reservations through budget travel websites. The termination had been handled professionally, with Victoria providing Derek with recommendations for hospitality training programs that might help him develop more appropriate attitudes toward customer service. The most important lesson from that evening, Victoria was explaining to the hospitality students gathered in the conference room where she had once confronted Derek about his assumptions and prejudices, wasn't about firing one problematic employee. The lesson was about recognizing that excellent hospitality requires treating every guest as someone whose comfort and dignity matter, regardless of their appearance, their budget, or their booking method. The new management team that Victoria had assembled was led by Carmen Rodriguez, a seasoned hospitality professional who had spent 15 years working her way up from housekeeping to hotel management, while maintaining the perspective and empathy that came from understanding the guest experience from multiple viewpoints. Carmen had immediately implemented changes that reflected Victoria's commitment to universal respect and quality service. Shared room accommodations had been redesigned to provide more privacy and comfort, with upgraded amenities that ensured budget-conscious travelers received the same attention to detail that characterized premium accommodations. More importantly, Carmen had established training protocols that required all staff members to spend time in various guest scenarios, including staying in different types of accommodations and making reservations through different channels, to understand the complete customer experience from initial inquiry through checkout. "Mrs. Sterling," said Jennifer Walsh, a junior studying hospitality management at the University of South Carolina, "how did your roommates respond when they learned about your identity and your role in creating positive changes at the hotel?" Victoria smiled as she remembered the ongoing relationships that had developed with Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Chen, and Mrs. Chen, who had become informal advisors and advocates for Grand Heritage Hotel's commitment to treating all guests with dignity and respect. "Mrs. Patterson has become one of our most effective ambassadors," Victoria replied. "She travels frequently to visit family members across the Southeast, and she always chooses Grand Heritage properties because she knows that our staff understand the importance of treating senior travelers with the courtesy and consideration they deserve." Mrs. Patterson had also contributed to staff training programs, sharing her perspective as an experienced traveler who had encountered both excellent and disappointing customer service across decades of hotel stays. Her insights had helped Grand Heritage employees understand how small gestures of respect and attention could make enormous differences in guests' comfort and satisfaction. If this story moved you, don't stop here. Click the next one, subscribe, and share this with someone who still believes in kindness. Mr. and Mrs. Chen had provided valuable feedback about the needs of business travelers who prioritized value and efficiency over luxury amenities. Their restaurant industry experience had offered useful parallels between hospitality and food service, helping Grand Heritage staff understand that customer satisfaction came from consistent quality and genuine care rather than expensive furnishings or elaborate presentations. The Chens helped us understand that successful business people often choose accommodations based on practical considerations rather than status displays, Victoria explained to the students. They taught our staff that guests who request economical options or share rooms might be making smart financial decisions rather than accepting limitations imposed by circumstances. The transformation of Grand Heritage hotels had attracted attention throughout the hospitality industry, with other hotel chains requesting consultations about implementing similar training programs and guest service philosophies. Victoria had been invited to speak at conferences about the business benefits of treating all customers with equal respect and attention. The Charleston property had become a model for other Grand Heritage locations, demonstrating that excellent customer service and profitable operations were mutually reinforcing rather than competing priorities. Guest satisfaction scores had improved dramatically, while occupancy rates and repeat business had reached record levels. Victoria had also established the Marie Sterling Hospitality Scholarship, named for her grandmother and funded through Grand Heritage Hotel's Community Investment Program. The scholarship provided financial assistance for students from modest backgrounds who wanted to pursue careers in hospitality management, ensuring that the industry would continue to benefit from leaders who understood customer service from multiple perspectives. "Students," Victoria said as she concluded her presentation to the hospitality management class, "I want you to remember that true hospitality isn't about the thread count of your linens or the marble in your bathrooms. True hospitality is about recognizing that every person who trusts you with their comfort while they're away from home deserves to be treated with dignity, respect, and genuine care." The lesson extended beyond hotel management to encompass broader principles about assumptions, prejudice, and the importance of treating every person as someone worthy of courtesy and consideration. Victoria's experience in room 347 had taught her that discrimination often happened through seemingly small interactions and unconscious biases rather than through deliberate malice or explicit policies. Carmen Rodriguez, who was observing the student presentation, approached Victoria after the group had departed for their tour of hotel operations. "Mrs. Sterling, I wanted you to know that 3 of our front desk staff have enrolled in hospitality management degree programs since you implemented the new training protocols. Your emphasis on professional development and understanding the guest perspective has inspired people to see their work as meaningful career paths rather than just temporary employment." Victoria felt deep satisfaction in knowing that her commitment to excellent customer service had created opportunities for employee growth and advancement. The changes at Grand Heritage Hotels had demonstrated that treating staff with respect and providing training opportunities created positive cycles that benefited both employees and guests. "Carmen, that's exactly what my grandmother would have wanted to hear," Victoria replied. She believed that hospitality work was a profession that required skill, empathy, and continuous learning. When we invest in our employees' development, they're able to provide better service and build careers that support their families and communities. As Victoria walked through the lobby of her Charleston hotel, she reflected on the profound changes that had resulted from her decision to experience her own property as a budget traveler rather than as a recognized owner. The uncomfortable night in room 347 had revealed problems that could have continued to damage guest relationships and company reputation if they had remained hidden behind positive management reports and sanitized customer feedback. The modest travel outfit that had once prompted Derek Peterson to question Victoria's appropriateness for quality accommodations had become a symbol of the truth that character, dignity, and worth could not be determined by appearance or apparent economic circumstances. Victoria Sterling had built more than a successful hotel chain and more than improved training programs. She had built a legacy of understanding that excellent hospitality required seeing every guest as someone deserving of respect, comfort, and genuine care, regardless of their background, their budget, or their reasons for travel. The woman who had shared a room with strangers in her own hotel had discovered that the most valuable insights about customer service came from experiencing her business through the eyes of the people she served, and that true success in hospitality meant creating environments where every person felt welcomed, valued, and treated with the dignity that her grandmother had taught her was the foundation of all meaningful service.